On Friday, May 3rd, 2023, at 10 in the morning, all was quiet in Blackburn, Lancashire, at a derelict warehouse known as the Old Fire Station. Law enforcement officers were positioned outside a roll-up security door. Behind it, pallets of merchandise sat sealed and stacked, seemingly ready for distribution. Nothing looked unusual, that is, until the door began to rise. But to understand the full scope of this operation, we have to go back 3 years, to the spring of 2020. Detectives in Manchester were busy cracking messages on a secure communications platform, while simultaneously, further south in Kent, a different group of encrypted users was moving kilos of cocaine. They operated under aliases like Call Me Curly and Call Me Fisherman. Different regions, different timelines, but the same illicit commodity, and each group was convinced their operation was airtight. Yet, one by one, each of these operations was brought to light. This is the story of how a cold storage warehouse in Lancashire and a network of encrypted phones in Manchester and Kent became the focal point of a relentless police investigation, one that tracked every courier, intercepted every message, and seized every hidden kilogram until the syndicates were finally brought down. Welcome to Burning Crimes. Let's get right to the case. The individual at the center of the Lancashire operation was 46-year-old Salim Chaudhry, a longtime resident of Blackburn, living in the waterside area. To all appearances, his life was stable. He was a man with access to storage units and business contacts that raised no red flags. But for almost a full year, what was disguised as legitimate commerce through a cold storage network was actually being used to traffic tons of potent cocaine throughout the country. His base of operations was the Old Fire Station, a decommissioned commercial building that had been converted into a private warehouse. The building was nestled among other storage units on a sleepy industrial road, the type of place where early morning deliveries could come and go completely unnoticed. From this hub, Chaudhry managed a distribution system that ran with the precision of a major logistics firm, with shipments arriving from the European continent to be repackaged and then sent out through couriers to different parts of the United Kingdom. Investigators later established that between September of 2022 and May of 2023, he had arranged to supply over 2,000 kilograms of cocaine, a massive volume of product with an estimated wholesale value of £70 million. This volume positioned him among the top tier of suppliers. What made Chaudhry's operation so effective was its brilliant simplicity, all disguised as a legitimate business. The illicit product was moved under the cover of a routine import route from Belgium, concealed within large blocks of Gouda cheese. Refrigerated shipping kept the temperature stable and effectively concealed the scent. Even trained police dogs would have struggled to distinguish the smell of dairy from the contraband sealed deep inside. Each block measured roughly 2 feet long and had been cut and resealed to look completely untouched. Other batches were stored in black garbage bags, ready for dispatch to couriers who were already on standby. From the outside, it looked like a bustling import business, but inside those refrigerated crates lay the evidence of a drug network running on an industrial scale, and the first clues that would soon lead detectives from Lancashire to a much wider conspiracy. At the other end of the country, nearly 150 miles from Blackburn, another individual played a critical role in keeping the network operational. Riyad al-Muhabbath, only 28 years old, worked discreetly from his home on Dean Road in South Shields. To anyone who knew him, he was just another face in the neighborhood. But to the investigators piecing this conspiracy together, he was far more than a mere courier. He was the logistics coordinator. He was the critical link between Chaudhry's Lancashire warehouse and the distribution network that stretched all the way across the northeast. Encrypted phone data later revealed that Muhabbath was directing couriers in real time, telling them exactly when to leave Blackburn, which routes to follow, and where to make the deliveries. He rarely touched the product himself, but he was involved in nearly every movement of the contraband and the cash. His communications, captured in messages and call logs, essentially created a digital map of the organization, one that mirrored the physical route the cocaine traveled, from the industrial parks in Lancashire all the way to the Tyne coast. The investigation that ultimately brought down Chaudhry's network began with a single piece of intelligence. Early in 2023, authorities in Lancashire received information suggesting that large quantities of high-grade narcotics were being imported from continental Europe into the northwest, disguised as legitimate cargo. Authorities had received similar tips before, but this one felt different. The regularity of the shipments and the seemingly ordinary nature of the goods just didn't add up. Investigators with the East Targeted Crime Team, along with the Serious Organized Crime Unit, initiated an undercover investigation. Their attention soon zeroed in on an old fire station in Blackburn, a site that was repeatedly popping up in vehicle tracking data and surveillance reports. The property had no current business license, no signs out front, and no official deliveries logged in the port's import records. Despite this, refrigerated vans were seen coming and going like clockwork. For weeks, law enforcement ran stakeouts, using unmarked cars parked on surrounding streets. Other teams tailed suspicious vehicles, making recurring trips between Blackburn, the Midlands, and the Northeast. As a clear pattern took shape, a crucial connection was made. Multiple couriers spotted at the old fire station were eventually traced back to addresses connected with South Shields, confirming a two-region criminal enterprise. In the background, investigators were piecing together a detailed communications profile. Phone records and call mapping revealed consistent contact between Chaudhry and Riyad al-Muhabbath, even when neither man seemed to be traveling. While encryption blocked access to the messages themselves, their frequency and timing pointed to the kind of coordination typical of a large-scale narcotics operation. May 3, 2023, started out like any other morning on Walpole Street in Blackburn. Delivery trucks rumbled quietly through the industrial park, the low hum of their refrigeration units bouncing off warehouse walls. But hidden among them were strategically positioned unmarked police vehicles. After weeks of intense surveillance, it was go time for the operation. A little after 10 a.m., Salim Chaudhry pulled up to the old fire station unit. He parked, unlocked the rolling steel door, and started to raise it, completely oblivious to the armed officers moving in on him. The second he got the door halfway open, the team made their move. The entire takedown was captured on body cam footage, which was later released by the Lancashire police. Once inside the warehouse, the sheer scale of the operation was instantly apparent. Pallets were stacked high with crates of Gouda cheese, all wrapped and sealed for shipment. Next to the cheese were black trash bags stuffed with packages of white powder, industrial-sized rolls of plastic wrap, and vacuum sealing machines. Investigators knew right away they had hit the heart of the operation. Chaudhry was taken into custody on site without a fight. Nearby, one courier was apprehended trying to flee the scene, but a second one got away, speeding north in another vehicle. Investigators immediately tracked the vehicle's route towards South Shields, and communication data confirmed the driver was still in touch with Riyad al-Muhabbath throughout the entire trip. While officers worked to secure the building, they began to catalog the mountain of evidence. 217 kilograms of high-grade cocaine, with each brick cleverly concealed inside blocks of imported cheese. It was the largest single cocaine bust in the history of the Lancashire police, with an estimated street value of £17.2 million. The major success in Blackburn set off a series of coordinated raids that followed. At Chaudhry's home on Waterside, police discovered approximately £10,000 in cash, stashed away in drawers and closets. They also seized documents connecting him to the transport vehicles and contact lists for the drivers. Farther north, officers from the very same task force, working in tandem with the Northeast Regional Organized Crime Unit, raided addresses linked to Riyad al-Muhabbath. He was arrested just outside his residence on Dean Road, in South Shields, standing just a few feet from an Audi that was later found to contain small bags of cocaine. A search of a related property in Jarrow turned up bundles of cash, a money-counting machine, and various quantities of suspected Class A narcotics. The evidence connected all the dots. The supply chain ran from Belgium, through the warehouse in Blackburn, and finally to the distribution hub in South Shields. Investigators would later state that both men went to extraordinary lengths to conceal their illicit product, using sophisticated, temperature-controlled logistics to hide the smell, weight, and true nature of their cargo. But what they didn't count on was the sheer patience of the officers, who tracked every single delivery, every coded message, and every van that passed through the old fire station's rolling door. Nearly 1 year after the dramatic raid in Blackburn, the case eventually made its way to Preston Crown Court, where the mountain of evidence was presented in its entirety, revealing the financial web that linked the two men at the center of a massive drug trafficking operation. In the course of the hearing, Detective Sergeant Hayden Sibley of the Lancashire Police's East Targeted Crime Team took the stand to describe the sheer scope of the operation. He detailed the immense scale of the enterprise and recalled Chaudhry's reaction at the very moment of his arrest, stating, "You could see by the look on his face that his world had crumbled." This observation captured more than just the end of one man's operation. It signaled the abrupt collapse of a criminal network that had long seemed completely invulnerable. During closing arguments, the prosecution emphasized that this case marked the Lancashire Constabulary's largest ever seizure of Class A narcotics. It also set a new standard for dismantling international smuggling rings through methodical, cooperative law enforcement efforts. On Friday, April 12, 2024, 46-year-old Salim Chaudhry stood before the court and pleaded guilty to conspiracy to distribute cocaine and to money laundering. The court heard testimony detailing the meticulous and precise structure of Chaudhry's criminal enterprise. For his role as the ringleader and the immense scale of his distribution network, Chaudhry was sentenced to 27.5 years in prison, one of the longest sentences ever handed down in Lancashire, for a single case involving Class A narcotics. Just 3 days later, on Monday, April 15, 2024, it was Riyad al-Mahabath's turn. The 28-year-old appeared before the same court, also pleading guilty to conspiracy to distribute cocaine, and received a sentence of 16 years in prison. From March to May of 2020, while the nation was in a complete lockdown, the streets of Greater Manchester fell into an unprecedented silence. But beneath that quiet surface, an encrypted network buzzed with life, carrying a constant flow of coded messages between distributors, couriers, and money collectors. This was the digital pulse of an organized crime group running its operations across Manchester, Rochdale, and Oldham, with the encrypted platform at its very core. Then, in June of 2020, the network was decoded, exposing thousands of criminal enterprises throughout Europe, including this particular one in Greater Manchester. Among the mountain of data retrieved, 4 specific usernames immediately drew investigators' attention, each tied to a key player in the same encrypted conspiracy. There was 38-year-old Nathan Lobley, who used the handle #Toxic, and 33-year-old Thomas Bradley, known online as Lovely Seal. Also in the group were 43-year-old Craig Ganson, identified as Paperball, and 46-year-old Paul Taylor, who operated under the handle Orgeru. These 4 handles collectively formed the digital spine of a criminal syndicate that operated with the belief that they were completely beyond the grasp of law enforcement. That is, until the encrypted platform was compromised. The encrypted communications between these accounts were suddenly laid bare. They revealed a highly coordinated operation centered on importing and distributing cocaine and heroin on a massive, multi-kilogram scale. We'll soon break down the specific role each man played. Working behind the scenes, analysts within the Serious Organized Crime Group, or SOCG, at Greater Manchester Police, embarked on the meticulous task of decoding, extracting, and mapping out every conversation. Every message was another piece of the puzzle, containing personal references that gradually chipped away at the anonymity protecting the user's handles. By cross-referencing data points from hundreds of different messages, detectives started connecting each digital alias to a real-world identity. What began as a jumble of indecipherable digital chatter soon transformed into a clear organizational chart, revealing not only who these men were, but the precise mechanics of how their network moved illicit substances, firearms, and cash throughout Manchester during one of the most restrictive periods in recent history. The EncroChat data effectively laid out the blueprint of a criminal business. It was a business built on precision. Each man had a designated role, and the messages on the network detailed his responsibilities, much like departments within a legitimate corporation. At the very top of this chain of command was Nathan Lobley, operating under the handle #Toxic. Digital messages tracked him acquiring at least 19 kilograms of cocaine, with an estimated street value between £684,000 and £798,000. He was also responsible for arranging the transfer of a firearm and its ammunition. Lobley initially denied any involvement, even when faced with proof that the group was prepared to use weapons to protect their shipments or settle scores. However, the EncroChat logs were so detailed that each coded message could be directly linked to his physical movements, financial records, and known accomplices. Next in the hierarchy was Thomas Bradley, who went by the handle Lovely Seal and served as the group's financier. His messages detailed the collection of cash from about 20 other encrypted users, frequently on a daily basis. Between March 16th and May 31st, 2020, he had laundered approximately £5.8 million, an average of around £2 million a month, and he maintained meticulous digital ledgers logging every pickup, transfer, and deposit. It was the sheer volume of Bradley's communications that initially drew the attention of investigators, as every message he sent left a digital breadcrumb that would ultimately connect him to the broader conspiracy. Craig Ganson, using the handle Paperboard, acted as the operation's wholesale regional supplier. From April to June of 2020, he acquired at least 11 kilograms of cocaine and 2 kilograms of heroin from his high-level contacts, a supply valued at over £400,000, which he then distributed throughout the region via a network of trusted buyers. Paul Taylor, whose handle O'Greo showed up less frequently in the data, functioned as both an investor and a secondary dealer. The records indicate he purchased 1 kilogram of cocaine for £37,000 and funneled £80,390 to Bradley over the course of the conspiracy, which helped finance and maintain the group's ongoing operations. The messages revealed candid conversations about product handovers, pricing, and the movement of cash, all composed with the unwavering confidence of men who thought EncroChat's encryption was unbreakable. When the Greater Manchester Police later recovered a firearm and ammunition, it proved the network was fully capable of backing up its business with lethal force if necessary. What came into focus was the image of a corporate-style criminal enterprise, highly structured, disciplined, and defined by a clear division of labor: suppliers, collectors, distributors, and financiers. Each member played a specific role, and for months, they operated completely under the radar until the EncroChat network collapsed, and their entire organization was exposed in plain text. By early 2022, investigators with the Greater Manchester Police faced the task of turning this digital intelligence into physical arrests. On March 22, 2022, the police department launched what they termed a Strike Day, a coordinated series of raids targeting locations across Manchester, Rochdale, and Oldham. The mission, codenamed Operation Pula, was aimed at individuals believed to be key players in encrypted criminal networks, responsible for distributing cocaine and heroin throughout the Northwest. But as officers descended on the homes of the primary suspects, they discovered one key figure was gone. Thomas Bradley had vanished. Detectives soon confirmed that he had fled the country, using forged documents and the very same network of contacts that had once facilitated his drug payments. For months, Bradley managed to stay off the grid, but his time as a fugitive came to an end in December 2022, when border officers at Holyhead Port took him into custody As he tried to re-enter the UK, his identity was confirmed using biometric scans, bringing a quiet close to his 9 months on the run. In the meantime, the trove of evidence extracted from seized electronic devices continued to expand. Digital forensic teams from the Serious Organized Crime Group, or SOCG, meticulously linked each EncroChat handle to the physical devices recovered during the raids. A combination of embedded GPS data, message timestamps, and transaction logs forged an unbreakable chain between the encrypted accounts and the real-world individuals using them. Investigators also unearthed courier chat logs that detailed the physical movement of multiple kilograms of cocaine and heroin, all throughout the pandemic. When the findings of Operation Pula were presented internally, law enforcement officials described it as a benchmark case, a textbook demonstration of how encrypted networks could be dismantled and tracked from a single message to a physical movement. What started as silent, encrypted chatter among 4 men now stood as a fully exposed criminal enterprise. On Thursday, June 13, 2024, the 4 men, at the center of Greater Manchester's encrypted drug conspiracy, appeared before the Manchester Street Crown Court, following years of painstaking investigation, surveillance, and digital forensics. The case known as Operation Pula had finally reached its conclusion, and the overwhelming evidence left no room for any doubt. Following the sentencing, Detective Constable David Grimshaw from the Serious Organized Crime Group commented on the outcome, stating that the men believed their encryption made them invincible, but they were wrong. He highlighted the investigation as a complex, multi-agency operation that took down more than just a drug pipeline. It dismantled an entire armed criminal network operating throughout the city. The Greater Manchester Police stressed that the group's impact went far beyond the narcotics, fueling violence, debt, and fear within local neighborhoods. The department reiterated its public appeal, encouraging residents to report any suspicious drug-related activities through Crime Stoppers, the GMP live chat feature, or by calling emergency services. Nathan Lobley, 38 years old, was sentenced to 14 years in prison for conspiracy to distribute Class A narcotics and for supplying a firearm with ammunition. Thomas Bradley, age 33, received a 9-year sentence for conspiracy to distribute Class A narcotics and money laundering. Craig Ganson, who was 43, was handed a sentence of 7 years and 10 months for conspiracy to distribute Class A narcotics. Paul Taylor, 46 years old, was put behind bars for 5 years and 8 months on charges of conspiracy to distribute Class A narcotics and money laundering. All told, the 4 men received a combined sentence of 36.5 years, a landmark ruling that brought an end to one of Manchester's most complex EncroChat investigations. But as the Manchester network was being dismantled, another encrypted trail was already surfacing, this one leading to Kent. From March to June of 2020, as the nation grappled with the height of its first lockdown, a different encrypted supply chain was discreetly trafficking tons of high-grade cocaine, this time moving from the coastal routes of Kent into southeast London and Norfolk. What started as a flow of coded messages on EncroChat quickly exposed a regional network that was operating with the same level of arrogance seen in the Manchester case. But this one was built on smaller, quicker movements, engineered to stay off the radar. At its core was 29-year-old Bradley O'Neill, from Halfway Road in Sheerness, who used the handle "Call Me Curly." O'Neill was coordinating the deliveries and payments, while his right-hand man was Wayne Denton, a 37-year-old from Parma Way in Downham Market, operating under the alias "Call Me Fisherman." The investigation soon tied a third individual to the operation, 25-year-old Charlie Eaton, from Witherstone Way in Eltham, southeast London. We'll break down the role of each of these men in just a few minutes. All 3 men, like so many others, were convinced that EncroChat's encrypted messages made them ghosts, believing their words would simply vanish without a trace. But once the encryption was broken, every single coded transaction, Every zip code and every password became a piece of evidence, laying out in meticulous detail the story of how a regional supply line in Kent had flourished under a false sense of digital security. Bradley O'Neill, the man in charge, was the first one to slip up. In a series of messages, he brought up past run-ins with the police, including an incident in April of 2020 on the Attu Highway near Bexley Heath, where officers had stopped and searched him. In his messages, he even mentioned getting busted and talked about a chopper flying overhead, details that investigators would later match perfectly with official Metropolitan Police records of a traffic stop that was assisted by the National Police Air Service. This cross-reference data confirmed beyond a shadow of a doubt that the user behind the handle was, in fact, O'Neill. But he didn't stop there, also mentioning the names and birthdays of his family members. In his encrypted chats, unknowingly handing detectives the personal identifiers that led right back to him. These mistakes, which seemed small and insignificant at the time, would become crucial pieces of evidence when investigators later connected the metadata to his phone and his home address. As for his associate, Wayne Denton, he made an even bigger blunder. At one point, he sent a photo of his driver's license to O'Neill during a chat, an image that immediately gave away his full name, date of birth, and his address in Downham Market, Norfolk. Investigators would later call this the single most damning message in the entire chat log, completely shattering any illusion of anonymity he thought he had. But the complete unraveling of the Kent operation. The investigation wasn't confined to just encrypted messages or digital breadcrumbs. It wasn't until March of 2021, almost a full year after the EncroChat network had been cracked, that police surveillance captured one of the most dramatic moments in the entire case. A high-speed chase tearing through the suburban streets of Sidcup in southeast London. At the heart of the chaos was Charlie Eaton, a 25-year-old from Witherstone Way in Eltham, who was a key player working with O'Neill and Denton in a connected supply chain. This network stretched from Kent to London and all the way north to Lancashire. Eaton was already on the detectives' radar, as they meticulously tracked his movements between various addresses in Eltham, Greenwich, and Chislehurst, all of which were known distribution hubs. On March 3, 2021, police units closed in to intercept a rented Toyota Prius that was sporting phony license plates. Behind the wheel was Eaton, but instead of pulling over, he slammed on the gas, sparking a chase that tore through several miles of residential neighborhoods. According to court records, the chase escalated rapidly. Eaton hit speeds of 77 miles per hour in a 30-mile-per-hour zone, forcing other drivers to swerve out of his way. He jumped a curb onto the sidewalk, barely missing pedestrians, and veered into oncoming traffic to escape the pursuing officers. At one intersection, he blew through a red light at full speed, a move prosecutors would later call an act of complete and utter disregard for public safety. The chase came to a sudden halt when Eaton ditched the car
Inside,
and took off on foot,
forensic
cutting
teams
through
discovered
backyards
1
and
kilogram of
fences.
cocaine,
In the ensuing
tested at
chaos, he dropped a
93%
Sainsbury's
purity,
shopping bag, which
consistent
officers
with
later
high-grade
recovered during a
imports
search
from
of the
European
area.
suppliers.
Inside, forensic
While
teams uncovered
Etherton
1
initially
kilogram of product testing at 93% purity, a quality consistent with high-grade imports from European suppliers. Although Eaton initially got away, the bag and the abandoned vehicle told the story he was so desperate to escape. Fingerprints, trace evidence, and surveillance footage tied him directly to the car, and, by extension, to the larger EncroChat network. 13 days later, he was arrested without incident after having his attorney contact the police, almost casually asking if he could turn himself in after celebrating his birthday on March 19th. That chase marked the final crack in the Kent supply chain. It revealed more than just a panicked courier. It exposed the sheer desperation of a crumbling organization buckling under the weight of digital evidence. What started as a reckless getaway attempt became one of the most solid pieces of physical evidence linking Eaton to O'Neill and Denton, and to a £2.5 million conspiracy that stretched across multiple counties. By the end of 2021, the final phase of the Kent investigation was set to begin. In December of 2021, detectives made their move on Bradley O'Neill. He was arrested at a trailer in Sheerness, where he was living with his partner and their newborn daughter. At the time of his arrest, O'Neill had reportedly left the game and was working a legitimate job, but the mountain of evidence collected from 2020 was overwhelming. It left him no room for a defense. That very same day, 37-year-old Wayne Denton was also taken into custody at his residence in Downham Market, Norfolk. His case would later be linked to a separate conspiracy involving illicit substances, dating back to early 2021, where he had continued to distribute Class A materials throughout London and the Southeast. I'll cover that particular case in a future video. The case finally concluded at Maidstone Crown Court on July 11, 2024. In his ruling, Judge Gareth Branson characterized their actions as both operational and managerial, pointing out that each man had played a calculated and significant role in a highly organized criminal enterprise. After the sentencing, Detective Officer Steve Brown of the Kent Police commented on the outcome. They thought encrypted messages would keep them safe, but there is no place to hide. Bradley O'Neill was sentenced to 9 years in prison for conspiracy to supply Class A narcotics. Wayne Denton received a sentence of 4 years and 9 months on 2 counts for the same charge. Charlie Eaton received a sentence of 5 years and 5 months in prison, along with a 3-year driving ban, for conspiracy to supply top-tier narcotics and for dangerous driving. With their combined sentences amounting to over 19 years, we're left to analyze the outcome. What are your thoughts on the investigation and the final judgments? Drop your own analysis in the comments below. We want to hear your perspective. And if you found our investigation valuable, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss our next case breakdown on burning crimes.